For the past 3 decades, carbohydrates have been the primary dietary villain in Western nutrition culture. The Atkins diet in the 1990s blamed carbs for obesity. The ketogenic diet in the 2000s and beyond blamed carbs for metabolic disease. Low-carb evangelists argue that carbohydrates are evolutionarily novel, that insulin is a fat-storing demon, and that humans are better off without them. Here is what the science actually shows. Carbohydrates are your body's preferred energy source. Your brain consumes approximately 120 grams of glucose per day and under normal circumstances will not run on anything else. The populations with the longest life expectancies and lowest rates of chronic disease, the Okinawans, the Sardinians, the people of Ikaria and Nicoya, all eat substantial amounts of carbohydrates, primarily from whole plant foods. The problem is not carbohydrates. The problem is the specific types and sources of carbohydrates that dominate modern Western diets: refined sugars, white flour, processed snacks, and sweetened beverages. These foods are categorically different from whole food carbohydrate sources, and treating them the same is where most dietary confusion originates. Today we break down the 4 key aspects of carbohydrates: simple versus complex, the glycemic index, and fiber, the most undervalued tool in nutrition. Simple carbohydrates are the smallest units of dietary sugar, molecules that consist of 1 or 2 sugar units. The 3 primary simple sugars are glucose, fructose, and galactose. When combined in pairs, they form disaccharides. Sucrose, which is table sugar, is glucose plus fructose. Lactose, the sugar in milk, is glucose plus galactose, and maltose is 2 glucose molecules. Because simple carbohydrates are structurally small, they are absorbed rapidly across the intestinal wall and enter the bloodstream quickly, causing a fast rise in blood glucose levels. Your pancreas responds by secreting insulin, the hormone that facilitates cellular uptake of glucose. When blood sugar rises sharply, the insulin response is proportional, sometimes overshooting and driving blood glucose below the baseline. This creates the classic blood sugar crash that manifests as fatigue, mental fog, irritability, and renewed hunger within 1 to 2 hours of eating. Simple carbohydrates occur naturally in fruit, where they are packaged with fiber, water, vitamins, and antioxidants that slow their absorption and modulate the blood sugar response significantly. This is fundamentally different from refined simple carbohydrates: white table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, white bread, white rice, soda, juice, candy, pastries, and most packaged snack foods. These refined products deliver a large glucose load with virtually no nutritional buffer, no fiber, and no satiety. Over years of regular consumption, the repeated insulin spikes from refined carbohydrates contribute to insulin resistance, a condition where cells become progressively less responsive to insulin signals, ultimately leading to type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and obesity. Complex carbohydrates are long chains of glucose molecules linked together, called polysaccharides. The 2 primary forms in human nutrition are starch and glycogen. Starch is how plants store glucose. It is found in abundance in grains including oats, wheat, barley, and rice, in legumes including lentils, chickpeas, and black beans, and in root vegetables including potatoes, sweet potatoes, and cassava. Glycogen is the animal equivalent, stored primarily in the liver and muscle tissue. It serves as a rapidly accessible glucose reserve for physical activity and overnight fasting. Because complex carbohydrates are long chains, they must be progressively broken down by digestive enzymes before individual glucose units can be absorbed. This slower digestive process has profound metabolic consequences. Blood glucose rises gradually rather than sharply, insulin secretion is moderate and proportional, and satiety lasts significantly longer than after simple carbohydrate intake. Complex carbohydrates from whole food sources also come packaged with fiber, B vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that simple refined carbohydrates lack entirely. There is also a fascinating subclass called resistant starch. Found in cooked and cooled potatoes and rice, underripe bananas, and most legumes, resistant starch passes through the small intestine without being digested and arrives in the large intestine largely intact. There, gut bacteria ferment it, producing short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, that nourish the gut lining, reduce colon inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, and lower post-meal blood glucose levels significantly. For athletes, complex carbohydrates are the ideal fuel source because they sustain energy output over longer periods without the spikes and crashes of simple sugars. The glycemic index, or GI, is a ranking system that measures how rapidly a specific food raises blood glucose compared to pure glucose, which is assigned a score of 100. Foods are ranked as low glycemic if they score below 55, medium if they score between 55 and 70, and high if they score above 70. Low glycemic foods include most legumes, non-starchy vegetables, whole oats, dairy, and many fruits. Medium glycemic foods include whole grain bread, brown rice, and sweet corn. High glycemic foods include white bread, white rice, watermelon, and most processed snack foods. The glycemic index is a useful but imperfect tool for several reasons. First, the GI of a food is measured in isolation, but we almost never eat foods in isolation. When carbohydrates are consumed alongside fat, protein, or fiber, the glycemic response is significantly attenuated. A baked potato eaten alone has a very different effect from the same potato eaten as part of a balanced meal. Second, the GI does not account for portion size. This is addressed by the glycemic load, or GL, which multiplies the GI of a food by the grams of carbohydrate in a serving and divides by 100. Glycemic load more accurately represents the actual blood sugar impact of real-world eating. Third, individual glycemic responses vary significantly due to gut microbiome composition, insulin sensitivity, and other metabolic factors. Despite these limitations, the glycemic index provides a valuable practical framework. Choosing lower glycemic carbohydrates as your primary sources leads to better insulin response, greater satiety, more stable energy, and reduced risk of metabolic disease over time. Fiber is a type of complex carbohydrate that your digestive system cannot break down. Humans lack the enzymes to cleave the bonds that link fiber molecules, so fiber passes through your stomach and small intestine largely intact and reaches your colon. There, something remarkable happens. Your resident gut bacteria ferment the fiber, extracting energy from it and producing short-chain fatty acids, principally acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Butyrate is the primary fuel source for the cells lining your colon and has potent anti-inflammatory and anti-carcinogenic properties. Regular butyrate production is strongly associated with reduced risk of colorectal cancer. The broader gut microbiome benefits of fiber are immense. A high-fiber diet promotes diversity and abundance of beneficial bacterial species, which are increasingly linked to immune regulation, mental health through the gut-brain axis, metabolic health, and protection against chronic disease. There are two main categories of fiber. Soluble fiber dissolves in water and forms a thick, viscous gel in the digestive tract. This gel slows digestion, reduces post-meal blood glucose response, lowers LDL cholesterol by binding bile acids in the gut, and significantly increases satiety. Best sources include oats, psyllium husk, apples, citrus, pears, legumes, and flaxseed. Insoluble fiber does not dissolve in water. It adds bulk and texture to stool, accelerates intestinal transit time, and prevents constipation. Best sources include wheat bran, whole grain cereals, nuts, seeds, and the skins of most vegetables and fruits. The recommended daily intake of fiber is 25 grams for women and 38 grams for men. Population surveys consistently show that average fiber consumption in the United States and Western Europe is approximately 15 grams per day, less than half the minimum recommendation. A high-fiber diet is among the most robust dietary predictors of reduced all-cause mortality. Here is what to take away from this video. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. The type, source, and processing level of your carbohydrates determines their health impact, not the mere fact that they are carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates from whole food sources like fruit and dairy are fine. Simple carbohydrates from refined sources, white bread, soda, candy, and processed snacks, should be minimized because they spike blood sugar without providing nutrition or satiety. Complex carbohydrates from oats, sweet potatoes, legumes, brown rice, and whole grains should form the majority of your carbohydrate intake. They provide steady energy, essential nutrients, and feed your gut microbiome. Use the glycemic index as a rough guide, but remember that glycemic load and the context of a full meal matter more than any single GI score. And fiber, prioritize it actively. Aim for 25 to 38 grams per day from a wide variety of legumes, vegetables, whole grains, fruits, nuts, and seeds. Fiber is one of the cheapest, most available, and most evidence-backed tools for long-term health. Most people are getting less than half of what they need. With that, we have covered all 5 major macronutrient topics: fat, protein, vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates. Use this series as a foundation and revisit any topic you want to go deeper on.